Hi, friends. It's your girl Harpo. Welcome to this episode of Brown Girl Guilt. Today, my guest is Summan Kandola. Summan is a documentary filmmaker, producer, and mindfulness coach dedicated to helping individuals build the habits, routines, and mindset for a mindful life. Her acclaimed work includes the two-time Leo-nominated film Identity of Wellness, available on CBC Gem. Additionally, audiences can enjoy all 4 episodes of her latest series, Monday Motivation, now streaming on CBC's Creators Network. You can connect with Summan for one-on-one coaching, content production, and speaking engagements. Hi, Sue.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. That's like my very professional bio.
But it's so all-encompassing of who you are and what you do.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. You know, I woke up this morning and I was like, every time we have a chat, like over the years, we're both in such different places.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
It is cool. And actually, so for those of you who are not familiar already, Sue has been on the podcast before. The episode that we did a long time ago was called Co-Creating Your Life. That is something that I don't think you and I have stopped doing, though. Hey, co-creating our own lives. If you haven't listened, I would encourage you to go and listen to it after this episode. In that episode, we talked about, I was really curious to learn from Sue what it means to participate in your life, like actually to create it in relationship with whatever, God, source, the universe. And I think it still stands true today. Yeah. So I want to contextualize how we actually know each other. I don't even know. Actually, no, I do know where we met. Long time ago, we met at an event called She Talks.
Yes.
I spoke at the event and you were working with an outlet and you coded me, you took a picture, and that's kind of how we met. And then over the years, we've just kept in touch. And more recently, the capacity in which I think our like acquaintanceship into friendship has been, you've coached me for a couple of sessions, and I was also part of an accountability group with you. So I want to go back to like where this particular part of our relationship started. You posted on Instagram in the spring of 2024 that you were starting an accountability group. And one thing that I know about Sue to be incredibly true is that you are someone who actions what they want and actions what it is that they're seeking. And so when you suggested an accountability group, I was like, I have to get in on this because I know that I'll leave this having gained and having learned. And so I was a part of an accountability group. And I think it was for 8 weeks.
8 weeks. Yeah.
8 weeks. Yeah. And if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably heard me say a couple times that I have meditated every single day since April. And that's because of the accountability group that I joined with Sue.
Because of you.
Yeah. But I think you really created a space and a container to like identify what it was that I really wanted. And then from there, I did 2 coaching sessions with you, and they were very, very monumental. And I do want to get into like what that process was like. But before we do that, can you talk to me a little bit about your coming into coaching? Like, where did that come from for you? Why did you want to start coaching people in your community?
Yeah. You know, it's really cool. I was actually cleaning out I don't actually have a childhood bedroom anymore. I grew up in Burnaby. I moved away for university. And when I came home, my mom had moved. So I had all these boxes in my mom's house. And last weekend, I was actually cleaning them all up and I found all my old journals.
Wow.
And in there, it's so cool because I had journals from when I was in high school. And I wanted to coach people. And it was like, you know, when you're like doing your visualizations, it was like, I will be coaching people and all these things I was writing down. Then I have application forms that I never actually sent in for coaching school.
No way.
Back in 2012, back in 2019. And then I actually launched I went into coaching school in 2020. And that was chaotic because that was the time I was producing and directing the film. 21 projects. I was a marketing director and I was also going to school every day at 6 a.m. But it was so like, you know, those things that you wake up for that you're just like, this gives me energy. It doesn't take energy away from me. It was one of those things that was like, it was such an internal, like, I have to do this. Like, it's so like a calling. And like now when I do it, it just feels so natural.
Yeah.
So I feel like I do it because it feels like my contribution.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I didn't know that this was germinating in your life for like 4 years or maybe 3 years before I actually found out about it, that you had gone to coaching school in 2020 and that it wasn't until 2024 or maybe the tail end of 2023 that I actually saw that you were openly now coaching people.
Yeah. Because before that, I was doing consulting.
Right.
And I loved consulting. But consulting always came back to personal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, like holding somebody in a personal container is very different than a professional container.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can merge the two, but I feel like some of the emotional stuff needs breath.
Mm-hmm.
And that breath needs space, which you need a container to be able to arrive there. Like, okay, I'm ready to like face this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think when you and I did our 2 coaching sessions, I was really in that place where I was like, okay, there's something that I would like to face. And I definitely have a bunch of different modalities, right? I have a bunch of different things that I sort of lean into. But when I came to see you in that session, I was like, Sue, I'm stuck in something. There's something that I'm stuck with. I have a lot of resistance to something. And I think you just asked me like really straight shooter questions. You were just like, okay, we're going to get accountable. We're going to get responsible, which is like, again, just so real about you. That is so characteristic of you. And you really helped me move something massive, which was I didn't want to go to Europe with my friends. And that was really, really hard for me to admit. And I can't believe I just said it out loud on my podcast as well. Because my friends were recently in Europe and people were messaging me on Instagram. They were like, please don't break up. Why didn't you go to Europe? It's like, relax. Like, we're not broken up. I just didn't want to go. But I had so much resistance to admitting something. And I find that so many of us as humans do have so much resistance to admitting what we actually feel.
Because when you admit it, you have to face it.
Yes.
I like literally remember your face.
Yeah.
When you were like prepping, and then you're like, turn your head and you're like, okay, so, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember that so clearly. And that's the thing is like when you admit something, when you bring it to the forefront, it goes back to that old quote where it's like, when you know better, you do better.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're a person who is willing to do better,
Mm-hmm.
wants to do better, you can't negate what you now know.
Yeah.
It's just against your own law.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was so interesting because I had that moment. I had that realization. I was in a place of awareness now. I don't want to go. And I thought that was the coaching session. I was like, okay, I have this awareness now. I feel better. I have relief. Okay, like see you next time. But you were like, okay, so now how are you going to act on this? And I think that was the part that I had been maybe missing up until that point from all the different modalities, that like you really turned the responsibility back onto me. And you were like, how are you going to do this? And then we sort of came up with I came up with a few things that I was going to do. And then your job as the coach from that point on was to just check in with me on that, to hold me accountable to it, and to really remind me of the relief that I did feel when I made that decision. And I think that I find that a lot of times when I'm having conversations with people who are skirting around responsibility, it's those action items that they don't really want to do. But then when I put it in this context of like, well, this is what self-love actually is. It's like doing the hard stuff. I think that there's like a little bit of a light bulb that goes on, but there's still so much fear.
Yeah. Because, okay, well, if we were to use your example as the example, there's this space, like going back to that like container and creating the space. There's a space that needs to be created for almost like all that gas to be let out of you of like, okay, I just admitted this. I don't want to do this. Now I have to figure out why I don't want to do this. And then I have to prepare myself for my own emotional like well-being while having this conversation. And then also my own emotional well-being for receiving whatever that person's going to say. Because you are not responsible for how they react to you, right? You're not responsible for, I don't want to say that you're not responsible for their feelings, because to some degree you are. I believe that's what friendship is in my heart. But you're not responsible for how they initially react. They are responsible for that and how they show up. But there's all that preparation that goes into it. And I think that like when you don't have a plan, then you can flounder and then you're just kind of existing. And in that existing, I think that's where overthinking comes up. That's where this idea of perfectionism comes up. This is where all that inaction comes up, and you get so stuck. And it's like I always say, like if you're sleeping on the same side of the bed all the time, it's like that that side just gets lower and lower and lower. And that groove just gets easier and easier. That neural pathway gets stronger, that it's like, it's harder actually to get out of that hole now than it would have been by just addressing it right away.
Right.
But that takes courage. That's a different skill.
Yeah. How did you get here? Like, how did you arrive at this understanding and this awareness? You must have obviously had to choose yourself over and over again to really be able to come into a place where you can model courage now for other people. Because when I hear you speak about this, it's so matter of fact in the way that you speak about it. I don't feel any resistance coming from you around it. How did you arrive at a place where you could model courage in this way to other people? And what I often find about, like, when I'm really paying attention to what you're saying, is that it's very, very action oriented. And sidebar, you've got a deck of cards, right? Of like, would you call it an oracle or affirmations cards?
I call it. It's like a mindfulness deck. Yeah.
It's like there's something about action even in the cards itself. Like the cards themselves are action oriented, right? So pose that question back to you. How did you get here?
How much time you got?
Episode runs for about an hour.
Okay, so there's 2 stories that I want to share.
Yeah.
Story number 1. So remind me to come back to the deck, okay?
Okay.
Story number 1. Right before we started recording, I was telling you I also had my own Europe friend experience.
Yes.
And the reason I bring that up is because, as I was saying, when I was going through my stuff at my mom's house, I was looking through some of my old journals. And at the time, I was 25 when I had done this trip. And I went with a friend who had lived away from me, but I talked to her every single day. And so she lived away. But when you have friends who, like, I have a lot of friends who do not live here.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can go into the groove of like, what are you doing? What are you up to?
Yeah.
What's going on? And then it's kind of like bounce, right? And yes, you'll have your few tight conversations, but those are more typically around like our feelings and like what's happening in our lives rather than our beliefs, right? I have those friends who I have those conversations with about my beliefs, but this girl, for instance, wasn't one of those people.
Yeah.
So backstory, now you have that. I was in Europe, and at that time I had already started to really start my journey. I felt like I was from a young age, very interested in psychology, very interested in communication, very interested in knowing more about the self, the world. Like, I am, like I was telling you this, I am an ocean. Yeah. Some people visit the ocean. Some people are the ocean.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Literally.
And so like that was very natural to me. And when I had gone on this trip, I, as a young person, was very like icebox hardcore person because I grew up my parents got divorced when I was 13 and the community was really hard on me. Yeah. And so I felt like the way that I reacted was just very like, I don't need you, and very defensive. So I grew up having to be very defensive and just like get shit done. Okay. Right. It's just you, your mom, and your brothers now. You got to make it work. Right. And so that energy then spilled into like a lot of my relationships. So as I'm growing and I'm getting older, I'm starting to thaw out. I always say that was like my thawing period where it's like I went from being like a very like hard exterior, but I was always like a gummy bear inside. Yeah. And so this friend, I was on this trip with her, and the reference point that she had was this old version of me, but I wasn't acting from that reference point anymore. And so I think it was really difficult for her to like understand how to maneuver conflict. Yeah. And so in this journal entry, it was like, when you get upset, count in your head 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I was literally always coaching myself because my initial response was always anger. Right. It was always defensiveness. And so I would coach myself like, okay, like how to deal with this situation, take a break, go outside and meditate, learn how to breathe. Like, and it's so cute, right? You see this like kid writing to themselves, like, here's how to not be a crazy person. You know what I mean? But it helped me. And it was this like, through that, in that friendship ultimately ended because there wasn't the capability for that person to meet me in that like new design to grow. And so fast forward to the mindfulness deck, this is going through a lot of my own spiritual awakening, my own spiritual journey, learning a lot about faith. I was a person who I always had faith. You mean you've met my mom? Like I've always had faith as a young person, but my faith was never my faith. You know what I mean? So I was starting to like, okay, what is cultivate my faith?
Right.
And as I was going through my spiritual journey, something that I really found challenging was, you know, you go and you get a tarot card reading, and I love tarot. I love the psychology of it. I love the philosophy of it, the journey, the fool's journey. And it's just like that part I loved. The part that I didn't love was the lack of accountability that that community took when they got their readings. And the way that it almost taught me from a young, ignorant mind to give away my power.
Totally.
Right? And there were so many moments where it's like, okay, you get a reading, you feel a little bit satiated because you're like, okay, everything's going to be fine. But then you go stew in your room. What are you doing? Like what are you doing to help yourself?
Yeah.
And that's why I created the mindfulness deck, because I was just like, I've always struggled with depressions as a young age. And I was like, I literally in my bed wrote 52 ways that I could take care of myself. And I said, if I do everything on this list and I feel like I biologically still need some support, cool, I'll go to the doctors.
Yeah.
But have I tried? Have I contributed to my own well-being? And that's why I created that, was because it was like so much of our well-being is in our own hands.
Totally. 100%. It's escapism is how I see it. So when you're putting the onus of your healing, of you feeling better, your equilibrium out into the power of something else external to you, it's escapism. It's momentary relief, but you're still left with the work. You're still left with the gaping hole in your fucking heart. You know what I mean? Like it's still your responsibility. And I've seen so many beautiful people in my life spend copious amounts of money, spend a lot of time just, you know, living very disconnected lives because they refuse to take responsibility and just change who they are.
And that takes time, right? Like I remember I was working a corporate job, and this is not saying that corporate jobs are bad. I'm actually an advocate for people to have 9 to 5s.
Stability.
well, you know what I mean? Here's the thing. As an entrepreneur, you're going to realize like who is an entrepreneur versus who is a business owner versus who is a great number 2, 3, 4, 5, 11. Like play your role and know it.
Yeah.
But anyways, I was at this corporate job, and I was getting raises. I was like increasing my roles, all these things. And I was like, I just don't want to be my boss.
Yeah.
And so I started working double time every single day, almost 14 hours a day for 6 months in a row so that I could save up enough money, and I just quit. But when I quit, I stayed at home and I would meditate for 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
So I was that person who was escaping. I cannot speak on things that I have not had to claw my way out of.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was that person who was meditating for 3 hours a day, and I was just up there in the ethers like, oh my God, this makes me feel so much happier than being down here.
Yeah.
Because being down here, I have to face it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a very different skill. And eventually you get to this point where you're like, okay, these are the rules of this game. How do I play them and play them well?
Totally. And it reminds me of this story about Guru Nanak that I've heard where, I'm going to butcher the story, but stay with me, where he basically goes into the mountains and he sees a bunch of these like sadhus, and they're like meditating and they're just like hanging out in the mountains. And he's like, what are you guys doing here? Like, come back down. I have a book, and I think it's called the Social Renunciate or something. And it's basically about this idea of like how we need to be those like monks or those sadhus or those like enlightened and spiritual beings in the real world, because this is where practical reality happens. We cannot escape into these mountaintops, literal or figurative. And, you know, there's some folks who I see doing that often. And maybe it's what keeps them safe at the moment. Like you said, it takes time, but we're meant to like experience life and be here. And you know, a friend of mine, Amrita, she always says, if you want to be up to shit, you need to figure it out here. Like if this is where you want to make impact, you have to figure out a way to like be here and move through it here. Right. So that's really important. And I love the way that you frame that.
Yeah. And then like even you saying that we have to figure out a way to be here, then I feel like that goes into now the realm of like as a coach, I know you'll understand this, like the realm of, is this a therapy conversation or is this a coaching conversation? Right? Because how many of us actually understand ourselves? Right. And I think that when we seek to understand ourselves, we're going to be able to navigate life in a very different way, right? Totally. Like there's a lot of things, people, places that may trigger me, but if I know that those things trigger me, why they trigger me, and I'm aware of it, then I can still enter those spaces. I just know now what I need from them. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. I am moving through at the moment a place in my life where my anxious attachment style is on full display. It's like I'm fully in it. And I'm just witnessing it. And so many times I've wanted to numb myself with work. I've wanted to numb myself with creativity, things that are actually good for me, quote unquote, and like healing. So many times I have wanted to numb myself by turning it off or by distracting myself with somebody else. And every time I've just come back to like, keep my heart open, keep your heart open, just keep feeling your feelings. Just literally stay in it, stay in the mud, stay in it. And I just hear Brene Brown's voice in the back of my head. She's like, just like, what is it? She calls it soft heart, hard back. Yeah. Just stay in it, right? And what I learned is that a bad feeling for me lasts about 90 seconds. 90 seconds is how long it lasts. But if I go book a massage, if I go get a tarot reading, if I go to a Reiki session, or I do a quick guided meditation, or if I go to yoga class, it'll last weeks. It will literally last weeks. But if I just sit there and feel it and acknowledge it and accept it, like I am feeling this right now, 90 seconds, it goes away.
That's actually, it's so funny. I have a video scheduled to go out either today or tomorrow at 3:00. That is literally this. Yeah. Because it's, okay, one, knowing, see, this is where I'm saying like, understanding yourself. Okay, what are you? You are a human being. So understand the human being. Yes. You know what I mean? Yeah. Understand that. That is your biology. That's different from your spirit, from your soul. Yeah. These are all elements of you, but you are in this vessel. So it's very important to understand this vessel. Like even on from a nutritional side, I was saying that like I've always struggled with depression since a young age. Yes, a lot of that stuff I can deal with in therapy, and I can deal with like the mind and the somatic experience of that. Yeah. However, your gut is your second brain. Yeah. So a lot of your serotonin is built there. So how are you feeding it? Yes. Right? Like there's so many things that if we look at it from like less of a emo perspective, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so like dead set on like, I am the victim of my life. Yeah. That like, yo, you can loosen the reins and like, you might actually be able to enjoy this thing.
Yeah, it's like rewriting our stories, right? So what's the cost of not doing that, Sue? Like when you don't do what you've just described, what's the cost of it?
I think the cost of it is like the life that you desire. And I know that that's such a like a statement that you see online where it's like, have everything you want. But it's like, it's the life that you desire. Now that might be different from you to me. Right? Like, so, okay, I always like to use Rihanna as an example. Rihanna, the life that she desires may be on a scale that another musician may not desire. Because another musician might desire to play piano at a hotel and to be able to sing and just like be in their element, but then go back into their family life. Very different than like singing on a stage and being high scale. Right. But it's like, it costs you like your opportunity. That you literally only have one life. So then I think it goes back down to your worthiness. Yes. And we think so much of worthiness is our negotiated value of like, am I worthy to be in this conversation on this podcast right now? That's not what worthiness is. That's value. Do I have something of value to share with you and your followers and my followers? Like, does that give them value? Can I give them a nugget to think about, go talk about with their friends? Right. Versus my worthiness. Like, yo, I'm alive. You know how hard it is to be alive? Like, go to the science. I don't know the number, but it's very hard. Okay. And it's just like, think of the fact that this sperm met this egg and you were created. Yeah. Yeah. God made you. Life made you. Love made you. Right. So it's like that, like, you can't negotiate with that. And once you stop negotiating with that and that is your floor, you're like, okay, what's my character?
Mm.
What value do I bring? What skills do I have? How do I want to show up in the world? You get to ask yourself better questions.
Yeah.
And that's why I love coaching. Coaching is I just ask people better questions.
Yeah. That distinction between value and worth and the way that you just put it is very interesting, because I always thought that your value is innate, but it's actually your worth that's innate. You come here with your worth. Mm-hmm. Your value is what you build.
Mm-hmm. And value is like, oh, I love that you said this, because something that I'm thinking about right now is like, if you think of like love relationships, not romantical, let's use like familial love relationships, is I can love you, but not like you or value how you show up in my life. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that you're worthy of life.
Yeah.
Did you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that is a hard thing to understand and comprehend. But when I was younger, one of my friends passed away at the hands of somebody that she loved. And I had to forgive this person and recognize that this person did something that they can never take back, but they have to live with that.
Yeah.
Right? And that now his mom has to deal with that.
Yeah.
And his dad has to deal with that. His siblings, everyone has to deal with that. And then her family has to deal with the loss of her life.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you take all of that and just be like, okay, well, what is life?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That takes a lot of forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Yeah. I think it also takes like an immensely open heart, you know, like a totally open heart, so much compassion, so much acceptance, which you said this to me so many times, like you can only meet people with the depth that you've met yourself, and vice versa. You know, people can only meet you with the depth that they've met themselves. And so to be able to hold that much understanding and forgiveness and compassion and love for somebody else, it comes from the reference point of that is how much of that you're able to give to yourself, which is why it's so important to sit in that and feel that. Yeah. And to like really deal with it.
Yeah. And that's like, you're like, oh, can we talk about your belief systems that are changing? Yeah. Like, this is my beef, right? Is like self-love is not self-care.
Yes.
Emotional intelligence is not emotional maturity. One of them is like, okay, I see it. One of them is calling yourself forward to it.
Yeah.
Right? So that self-love and like being compassionate to yourself, it's actually what allows you to be compassionate to others.
Right.
But to be nice to yourself, you have to be willing to like kind of forgive yourself.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to forgive the people around you.
Yeah.
And so that's a big thing that I work with. It's like, what is your relationship with like holding on to your pain?
Mm-hmm. It's reminding me of a conversation that I literally had with a friend this morning, where she has to see someone very soon. She's going to run into someone that was really wrong to her. And she was like, I have to move through the pettiness, and one day I'll be at indifference. But, you know, and I have a little bit of shame and guilt around wanting to be petty. And I fully was like, fuck it, be petty, be in it, feel it. She hurt you. You're allowed to be petty. Sit in it, accept it. Indifference can wait. And I said, accept it. It doesn't make you a bad person at all. But if you don't accept it, you will be petty forever.
Yeah.
But if you feel petty for a day, maybe you'll feel indifferent tomorrow. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right? It'll be closer and closer to you. I am such an advocate for accepting everything. Acceptance doesn't mean that you're making it okay. Acceptance just means that you accept it. And now you can do something with it.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. I can't say it better myself.
Right?
Yeah.
Literally. So the other thing that I think about a lot when I think about Summan Kandola, when she pops up into my mind, automatically, I don't know why, but I have self-trust just synonymously with you. I have gained self-trust through you as the vessel. Seriously.
That's so sweet.
I would not have known what self-trust is without you. What is self-trust to you?
Self-trust to me is reliability, respect, honor. It's like self-trust to me is like, say what you mean what you say. I remember, okay, everything I know through rap lyrics. So I used to be obsessed with T.I.
Yeah.
And I when I was a kid, I was like, he says, say what you mean what you say, like in a song. And I was just like, I wanted to tattoo that on my body. You know what I mean? Like, put your money where your mouth is. And like, so self-trust to me is like your own way, like your body's way, your mind's way of knowing that like you got you. You are with you forever.
Yeah.
Right? Like till death do we part is with you.
Yeah.
You know, even with a partner,
Yeah.
if you are with a partner literally till your dying day, one of you is going to be on their own.
Yeah.
Right? So like that cultivation and that relationship with self is so important. A flag that I want to add in here though is there's the relationship with self, and then there's also, I think, another relationship to really like ideate and understand for yourself is your relationship to the world. Whether you ground yourself in faith, whether you ground yourself in science, in evolution, in whatever you end up believing, having an understanding of your beliefs, I think is very detrimental to how you end up moving on this earth.
Interesting. Can you break that down? Like, why is that detrimental?
Because I think that it helps you make decisions.
Right.
Yeah. So I really believe, okay, so I am a faithful person. I am not a religious person.
Yep.
And so what that means to me is that I have deep faith in a higher power. I have deep faith in the universe. I have deep faith in science, but I do not particularly believe in the rules or routines of any specific religion. But what that faith has given me is a light, not just in the darkness, but also in the joy. Because I think that you can relate to this, and I'm sure a lot of your community can relate to this, is that there's so much focus on getting out of survival. But how do you thrive?
Yeah, totally. What does that even
look like? How do you feel
like?
your joy? How do you feel safe being happy?
Yeah.
I've done more work on feeling good, like feeling okay to feel okay and feeling good than I have done on my survival shit.
Holy fuck, that's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. I never stop and think, because when joy inevitably comes and it knocks on my door, I never know how to receive it. I'm always terrified.
You're terrified of it because it's like, oh man, it's going to go away. It's going to slip through my fingers. So how do you create self-trust that like I can hold joy? Because we have this idea, I think, as people, when we're trying to like heal, better ourselves, where we think we're going to arrive and then it will just always be sunny.
Yeah.
That's not life. Like this goes back to the rules of the game. Rules of the game, what goes up must come down. Right? So how do you find equilibrium? How do you hold your joy? And how do you hold your pain? That'll say so much more about you, to you, not to anybody else, of how you can actually navigate your life.
Totally. And my focus for, this past quarter, just before we're recording this, was self-trust. And the mission statement, the statement that I had around that was building faith in my ability to choose what's right for me. That is all that I wanted to do, was to just build faith in my ability to choose what's right for me as it was showing up, not using the past as a reference, not using the future as in like, as a catalyst, but just right here in this moment being like, okay, can I trust myself to make the decision that is most reflective of what's right for me? And that could have been joy. That could have been survival. It could have been scarcity. It could have been fear, but it could have been love as well.
It could have been anything.
Could have been anything.
I love that you said that, because that is like I go back to this like concept that everyone wants, like we've been taught this, is like, I do A, I receive B, right? But what you just said is like cultivating self-trust is just that I can handle what life throws at me.
Totally. I
trust myself to maneuver through my life, because you know that you have the tools. And going back to what you were saying about the 90 seconds and feeling your emotions, and then using all those other modalities, you'd feel it for weeks. But what if you now knew that you could feel your emotions and feel them through and utilize those tools as a catalyst
Right.
to process those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Now your tool isn't using you, you're using it.
Yeah. And you're not forfeiting anything onto anything else.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yoga's going to save me.
Yes.
This tarot card is going to save me.
Yeah.
Like Reiki, it's going to take away all my bad energy. Like it is like it. I believe in all these things.
It will.
Don't get me wrong. It will. However, how are you using it? How are you co-creating it?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
I'm just saying the same damn thing.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it's like the co-creation again, because if you think about it, it's like something will only meet you halfway. I'm, in like not, I read so slowly in this phase of the year in this season. I'm reading Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I've been saying that I'm reading this for months now.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
It's a big book. It's dense.
It's dense. And he's at the part where he's teaching you the meditation. And I'm like, I'm not there yet. So give me a second. But what I've learned about quantum reality and our subconscious mind and our brains and the way that we literally manifest our reality. Manifestation is also another thing that I really learned from you in the way that I really resonate with it, which is it's not enough to just think and like do, you have to believe. And it's not enough to just believe, you actually have to think and then you actually have to do. Like those three things sort of come together.
Yeah.
It's your thinking, it's your believing, and then your action. And I feel that a lot of times we can skirt around and we can forfeit. But if you're not an active participant and you're not meeting the modality halfway, like, yeah, you can go to Reiki and they can like take energy off of your aura. But if you were the entire Reiki session, you were laying there like, oh my God, I'm a bad person, I deserve this, then your $120 that you spent, you should have just thrown in the garbage can because that's what you're doing, right? It's not working together.
Yeah, you're not arriving to it. Something that you just said about like thinking, believing, and doing. Good marketing will make you think that you don't have to lift.
Yeah.
But you do need to lift.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like good marketing will tell you that everything comes easy. And I am not going to be here saying that you need to have a hard life or everything needs to be hard or everything needs to like feel like triumph. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to do the work.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're having this conversation right now. Yes, it's easy and it flows, but we did the work to have this conversation and to receive each other in this way. So it's like to truly allow things to come into your life, like even how you're saying with the affirmations, you cannot just say, I'm so over the I'm worthy. So we've already solved that one. So now let's go to the I am enough. Cause that is a big one, right? And that one is attached to so many different levels of our lives, right?
Yeah.
I think that's everyone's.
Yeah.
And you cannot just say, I am enough, I am enough, I am enough, I'm enough. Joe Dispenza might disagree with me. But
no, he'll agree with you. I know where this is going.
But like, you have to also be like, well, why was I saying that? So even if you take yourself back to those micro memories, not just when you were a kid, when you were a teenager, all these previous selves that you have within you, when you go back to those memories, sometimes you gotta like understand what happened there.
Yeah.
Oh, this happened. They said that. This is how I digested it. I I'm compassionate to myself for receiving it this way because that's the button in me that hurts. And I used it as more fuel on the fire. Right? That that's a conversation with self. Yeah.
And I don't share my like actual practice that often with people because people can be so prescriptive and they can be like, you're doing this wrong. But how I do it is I do actually systemize everything. So I will journal everything and I will pour over it like a freaking scientist doing a report. I literally do. I'm like, I did this and that happened. And then they said this and this happened and that happened and this happened and that happened. And I map it all out.
Yeah.
And then I sift through it and I do it mentally first and then I'll go to the feeling and then I'll come back to the mental. That's how I close the loop on what I'm moving through. And sometimes people are like, no, you can't control your way through this.
But it's what works for you.
I know. So I'm not controlling my way through it.
Yeah.
I process. That's how I move through and I process.
Yes. See, I was on a podcast and somebody asked me, like, what's the one thing that you would tell somebody to do? And I was like, I wouldn't tell them to do any one thing.
Yeah.
Because what works for them may not work for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I would tell you to do is create a deeper relationship with your own intuition so that you can figure out what to do for yourself.
Yeah.
You may not know how a tool works. Let's say we're talking about Reiki. You may not know how Reiki works. You may not know, you may not have never been to a yoga class. But if you know how to tune into yourself and your system is like, I could use like a stretch or a yoga or something. Use that intuition and go to that. But it's divinely guided, not from another source, but with that source and yourself.
Right. Interesting. When I'm asked that question, I always say 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes before bed, just sit there and pay attention.
Tune in, drop in.
I don't say meditate anymore. I just focus on your breath, or just give yourself 5 minutes in the morning and then 5 minutes before bed and just watch it. Mm-hmm. Just do that. That's what I usually say. But I like that, this like lean in with your own intuition. Mm-hmm. If you could say something to someone who's like in this middle space, who is maybe feeling this fear of taking that responsibility, really becoming like, you know, embarking on inner leadership, what would you say to them?
I'd ask them to ask themselves, like, what will I miss out on?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because everyone is driven by their own desires. And I think that, like I told you, you caught me at a time where my beliefs, I'd be beefing with the world. So I'm also really over talk down marketing.
Yeah. Where
it's very like, okay, something that's really huge online right now is finances, right? Yeah. And so it's everywhere. And it's beautiful because I want us to be a more financially healthy world. That being said, is some of those statements will be like, you're never going to figure this out if you just keep doing that. And it's so negative. And if I was the person who had bad financial health and somebody is telling me and reminding me and screwing a screwdriver into my heart, like, I don't want to fucking work with you. You know what I mean? Like, some
people do, but
yeah, you know? like, and I get it. That might work for somebody, but to me, that makes me feel like that makes me connect with my shame.
Yeah.
Allow me to connect with my power.
Right.
You may not know how to do this right now. However, this is how it's showing up in your life. This doesn't have to be this way. Here are some tips and tools that you can implement right away to start to create more space to think differently. Okay, you're making me feel capable. You're making me feel powerful. You're making me feel like I can like usher my life forward. You know what I mean? So like using the financial example, right? If I started to take those steps, if I started to open myself up, then what do I get to think about now?
Yeah.
Because the person over here is thinking about surviving in a very different way. And their relationship with scarcity is not actually teaching them. It's enslaving them. Versus scarcity over here can teach them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, like these habits are creating this result.
Right.
This habit could create a different result. What would you want to do with that result? So you can start to think differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. I think that's such a good question to pose to folks. And then for the folks who are listening, it's so important to ask yourself that, because we typically allow fear to hold ourselves back. But in the same way that you've just talked about scarcity, fear can also be a catalyst in a good way. And I love that you're positioning fear. Like the way that I'm receiving is like you're asking us to position our fear as a catalyst to be like, okay, so you might wake up at like 40, 50, 60, 90 one day, and then have like not lived the life that you wanted to. And the only person to blame, this is going to be so contentious, people are going to get mad that I'm saying this, is like, it would have been your fault. It literally would have been your fault. So what can you do now? Like, what is it that you would be missing out on when you wake up on that morning and you're like, man, my entire life just went by.
Yeah. And to what you just said, like the your fault thing, if anyone has read Trevor Noah's book, it's so freaking good. Have you read it?
No.
Oh my God, you got to read it.
What is it?
Born a Crime. And in there, he talks about the classic, like, teach a man to fish. And he's like, you can teach me to fish, but I needed a fishing rod.
Yeah.
Right? And so there was a man in his life who gave him the fishing rod, which allowed him to start to hustle and create his own dough. But the thing is like, if you like most people have fishing rods around them, and we're at a time where we see so many stories where people have done more with less.
Yeah.
Right. So I am not talking to that person who is not in this conversation, and they should already know that. There's a group of us who has and can. So that is a question and a conversation between self, right? You are 1 degree between you and something else. And it's your willingness. One of the first questions actually I ask anyone before they coach with me is like, what is your willingness meter at right now? Are you willing to show up? Because actually this is so funny, because one of the reasons why I'll turn people down or why people will not work with me is because their willingness meter is not high.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But the willingness meter has to be willing to be pushed. Yeah. And that catalyst is different for everybody.
Totally. And the other thing that I'm really thinking about, and this is coming up for me at the same time, and so perhaps it's also coming up for people who are listening, is many of us are on this road and we're on the path and we have the willingness and we're doing it, but maybe our loved ones don't. And I know that there are a lot of brown girls who listen to this episode, to listen to this podcast. And I'm one of you, where there's people in my life who just they don't have the will. They just don't have the will to change. They don't have the will to be better, to change. And it's really exhausting to try and take those people along with you. And what I have found a lot of solace and comfort in is just letting them go, just letting them be, still loving them, still accepting them, seeing them as worthy, like you said, but not trying to find will for them or give will to them. Like I think I'm thinking a lot about my parents in this context, like I feel like I have done so much in trying to find that will for them, model my will, all of that. And then I think that there's going to be some people, they're going to be who do it, and then some people who don't. And I think that we have to be okay with that, and we have to let go of the guilt, and we have to accept it, because part of that also feeds into your process, right? Like sometimes it really weighs down on my own will. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's such a dangerous, hard place to be, right?
It's a hard place to be.
It's a hard place to be. So what I've done is just like built this like really beautiful, energetic force around me. And I'm just leaning in full heart and trusting and keeping the faith that, if other people don't find the will, it's okay. My will is strong enough.
Yeah. And that's a hard one. I feel like different people have different value in our lives. And when you say parents, I'm not going to say this as your parents, I'm just going to use parents as example.
Yeah.
Is like parents' value is different than maybe what we need at that time. So needing somebody to grow for you and with you, that may not be what your parents do.
Yeah, it's not part of their contract
with you. It's not part of their contract with you. But I can't speak for everybody, right? I can only speak from my experience. Like my parents' experience is just to love me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for me to receive their love and be like, okay, thank you. And now I can continue to drive forward in my way. I think that that's really a hard one, because I think it's going to be a lifelong thing.
Yeah.
Because I think there are people we just love so deeply and we can see them so clearly and we want such good things for them.
Yeah.
And when you can see that for them and they can't see that within themselves, you have to remind yourself, it took me to get to this vision of myself.
Yeah.
So I cannot intrinsically change them.
Right.
They need to intrinsically desire that for themselves. And that in itself is like, okay, well, how do I relate to you now?
And that desire, I like to think, is also cosmic in a certain way sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like, I think about it all the time. I'm like, why at 27? Me and all this? What the hell? And then, some people, again, later or never, right? So that's a different perspective for me. And I really appreciate that one, that maybe their purpose is just to love. And if I'm going to harp on and on about acceptance, then I have to accept that also.
Yeah. And maybe they're like, just speaking to the people who have a challenging relationship with parents in a different way, where they may not feel like their purpose is to love them. sometimes their purpose was just to help you come on this earth.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that. And I think that their purpose may have lied in you, like finding your value, your worthiness, like rooting into the earth as your first feet and your first generational shift and change as you grow your new tree. And that person was just the person who brought you into life.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard pill to swallow.
Totally.
Because it's a pill that you'll have to swallow again and again and again at different moments of time that mean something to you.
Yeah. And with varying levels of grief.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for this beautiful, wholesome conversation, Sue. It was so eye-opening. I had so many aha moments during all of it. And thank you for being so open. I know you said that you are in between like belief systems, but I think that it's such an open, wonderful space that you're in. And there's so much that's just like coming up. And I think a lot of people who are going to listen to this are going to resonate, because I think that we are bombarded with so much information all the time. It's so hard to tune in and listen to your own voice. And everything that you have said to me today has felt like just tune into that voice. So I appreciate that a lot. And thank you for your openness.
Thank you so much for this conversation. And you bring a lot of light into my life as well. So I just hope you know that I feel that and I appreciate you. And this community appreciates you.
Thank you. Yeah. So if you do want to connect with Summan, whether that's just to keep up with her content because it's really fucking real, or you are interested in working with Summan, or actually just even engaging in the beautiful stories that she tells, you can find her on Instagram, Coach with Summan, Coach with Sue.
I am Summan Kandola.
I am Summan Kandola. Okay.
I finally took your advice.
Yeah. I saw that actually. And I was like, yay.
Yeah.
So I am Summan Kandola is on Summan's Instagram handle. And I'll obviously share you on the Brown Girl Guilt account as well. But hopefully we'll see you there.
Yes. Thank you, love.